Good morning, Baltimore. It is Thursday, July 23rd, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. Sam, it has been a day here today. I am recording here from Fenway Park, where the Orioles have just split a doubleheader here against the red-hot Boston Red Sox, snapping their 15-game winning streak with their Game 2 win. It was a massive win for the Orioles. How you doing, man? How's everything going out there?
Good. It feels important that we mention this now that we're recording half the podcast after the Orioles doubleheader, and our other half, the Ravens half, we recorded earlier in the day. So when I'm wearing a different shirt or our backgrounds look different or things change, just don't be alarmed, because we had a little bit of a disjointed podcast today, but that's just the effort that we put in to ensure the best content for our listeners.
We're just thinking about you, the people, all right? I actually walked back to my hotel in between the two games today just to talk about Ravens, Nnamdi Madubuike, wide receiver options. We talked about power rankings and where the Ravens are slotting in as far as national perception goes. I think we had some really great conversations there, so definitely stick around for the back half of the show to hear all of that. But first, we got to talk about the Orioles, because this game here, it's the July 22nd, right? Games in July can't really be considered must-win games. There's a lot of season left. I believe the Orioles have 54 games left in the season to determine their fate. So by that mathematical way of viewing things, yes, today was not a must-win game. But it was a must-win game in Game 2, because the Orioles, with just 9 games remaining before the trade deadline, going into their doubleheader against the Red Sox on Wednesday, had they swept, they would have moved into 1.5 games behind the Red Sox for the third wildcard spot in the American League. Had they been swept, which there was a chance of that happening after losing Game 1, they would have been 5 games back, again, with just 9 games to play until the trade deadline. And with 5 games back, that starts to feel like a pretty insurmountable deficit here, and where the front office might have to start thinking about selling at the trade deadline should they lose a couple of games right after that. And they certainly have some tough opponents ahead. So for the Orioles, it was a massive game, the biggest game that they played all season. And in Game 2, Kyle Bradish goes out and shoves 6 strong innings, 1 run, his first start since signing his long-term extension with the club. But for the Orioles, they're kind of able to maybe not take their season off of life support, but certainly a big sigh of relief for Baltimore to be able to walk out of Boston having salvaged a win in this 3-game series, but also have a winning road trip because they swept the Houston coming out of the break. So a 4-2 road trip for the Orioles that has them rolling. They're 8-10 over their last 10 games, and certainly look like they have a chance now to climb into playoff position here over the next couple of weeks before the deadline.
Yeah, Matt, what a swing this has been for the Orioles. I mean, you think about the butterfly effect of winning that game versus the alternative of losing. They survive in Boston to take that third game. They put themselves within striking distance of a spot in the playoffs, and more importantly, the worthwhile chase of being buyers instead of sellers. This is a team that has a chance to put itself in playoff contention, has a chance to make moves that will put itself in even better playoff contention. And just to think about the alternative, you mentioned it is late July. Generally, these games don't matter as much as we're probably going to talk it up to be, but this was such an important stretch for them, because if they lose that game and they fall, 5 games behind the Red Sox, you're looking at a team that becomes sellers and then probably looking at a lot of change. And I think the big question going around, maybe vocal parts of the Orioles fan base online, is how big that change might be. Obviously, you had talked about this possibility maybe a couple weeks ago, but there are a lot of fans who are worried, like if things get really bad, might Adley be on the chopping block? To what extent things might have gotten bad over this one game that put him in a bad position that might have snowballed into worse position. You're looking at the potential for major change. I don't want to overblow it. I don't want to push the snowball too far, but I think it's worth at least acknowledging that the Orioles did do some salvaging. You said it there. They took themselves off life support, and they're putting themselves in contention to keep this train moving.
Yeah, coming into this series, Orioles had won 7 in a row, having finished the first half there, sweeping the Kansas City Royals. They come out and they sweep the Astros, which was also a big series because the Astros were one of the teams that were also ahead of them at the time in the wild card standings. They moved past them. They moved past the Twins, and now it was them, the Seattle Mariners, and the Boston Red Sox as the only teams kind of standing in the way of a playoff spot. And the Red Sox, who have been on an incredible run, 15 straight wins for them after winning the first 2 games of the series before the Orioles finally ended.
I don't mean to cut you off, Matt. Just crazy to think how far the Red Sox have come and what a weird season they've had. As much as we've talked about how weird of a season it's been for the Orioles, like the Red Sox fired their manager, cleared house. It looks like the vibes were at an all-time low, and now they're on a historic. Now they, I guess, just finished or wrapped up what was an historic streak.
Yeah, and they're doing this without their number 1 starter, Garrett Crochet. He's been hurt. And the former number 1 prospect, one of their most promising young players on the team, Roman Anthony, has also been sidelined with long-term injury. So doing it without the 2 of them after firing Alex Cora, after trading Rafael Devers at the deadline last year for basically nothing, Craig Breslow on the hot seat, all of this. They're playing their best baseball, and they're doing it in a complete way. The pitching has been absolutely fantastic for the most part over this stretch. The hitting has been top to bottom lineup, getting contributions from all sorts of guys. And the Orioles in Game 2
exactly what the Orioles have needed to do. Just to be
right,
clear,
right. Yeah. And they played better of late, but it also hasn't been as complete as, what's necessary to go on a 15-game winning streak here. But the Orioles jump out to a 4-0 lead in the first inning in Game 2. That was the largest deficit that the Red Sox had faced the entire time they were in their streak. They had never faced a deficit more than 3 runs the entire time. So the Orioles immediately kind of punch them in the face. Red Sox thought they might be getting Ranger Suarez back from the injured list to start this game, and they end up not reinstating him, going with an opener who doesn't make it out of the first inning, and the Orioles are kind of able to jump ahead early and set up Bradish, who looked awesome. It wasn't like a crazy great start for him, like statistically. It wasn't him, carrying a no-hitter deep into a game or racking up double-digit strikeouts. But it was a win that the Orioles simply needed to have. And when you sign a guy to an extension like that, Bradish being the highest paid pitcher in Orioles history, you're going to look to him to be a stopper, to be the guy that when you need a big win, that when you're in a must-win situation, he comes through. And that's exactly what he did on Wednesday night.
Yeah, credit to the offense, because we've seen the Orioles do this where the starter you pay a starter a lot of money, and he does exactly what he needs to do to put you in a position to win a ball game, and the offense has not been there for them. More specifically, we've seen the Orioles fail to do that in what we're calling must-win games, playoff games. So credit to the offense for doing enough, jumping out early, and putting themselves in a position to win that game.
Yeah, and they got big series out of Gunnar Henderson, who had 3 doubles in Game 1. He triples in Game 3 here, or Game 2 of the doubleheader, Game 1 of the series. All 4 of those extra base hits coming left on left, which is extremely encouraging. Good series for Pete Alonso, has a couple of extra base hits. Taylor Ward reaches base 4 times, I believe. And this is huge because the Orioles were hit pretty hard this series, losing both of their starting catchers to injury. Adley Rutschman going on the IL on Monday with a left wrist inflammation that he suffered on a weird swing on Friday in Houston. And then Samuel Basallo joining him on the IL Wednesday with right shoulder inflammation after he had an awkward swing of his own, re-aggravating a shoulder injury. And that's on top of Blaze Alexander going on the IL to start the second half after he had a bone broken in his hand on a hit by pitch in the final game before the All-Star break. So 3 of the Orioles' best hitters this season, Rutschman, their All-Star, Basallo, third on the team in home runs, Blaze Alexander, multi-position guy who has been one of their hottest hitters the last 2 months. All 3 are out. So that previous 3 I mentioned, Gunnar Henderson, Pete Alonso, Taylor Ward, they need that trio to step up and carry them here over the next few weeks.
I should ask Matt, what were the vibes like just around the clubhouse, around covering the team, when obviously with coming out of the Blaze Alexander going on the IL, and then Adley and Samuel Basallo, just the vibes of that on paper that feels like the death knell for everything that this team was stepping into. Such a historic, I don't want to use that word, such a momentous series for them, the real pendulum swinger of this middle stretch of July baseball, like such an important series to have those all 3 of those guys be down going into this. Just what were the vibes like?
Yeah, it was a lot of like, we got to be next man up. the Orioles did not want to be in a position and really put themselves by assembling what probably is the best catching tandem in baseball in a position where they would never have to have Sam Huff and Chadwick Tromp as their two catchers on their active roster. But that is where they are right now with both of those guys hurt. It's a huge blow. You're not going to be able to replace those guys from the catcher position. You're going from having one of the best offensive productions from a position that doesn't generally provide it to now being a net zero, maybe a net negative with what Chadwick Tromp and Sam Huff are going to provide. Neither of them well lauded for their bat at all. Really, it's about defense at this point now for them, moving forward. So you're going to need that offensive production to come from other places, and that means Gunnar Henderson's got to figure it out. And right now, he said actually a post-game on Wednesday that he has been trying and tinkering and messing with so many things that he actually decided to start trying less. And he went up and had a batting cage session where he went in there and he turned up the batting cage, the machine, high velocity, and started just doing soft swings. Just nice and easy, what felt fluid to him, and just rolling with that. And he had a great series coming out of that. So maybe that's something that he's going to be able to build on moving forward. We'll see. Alonso's been one of their best hitters on the team this year. He's just going to have to keep doing what he's doing. And maybe Taylor Ward, if he could provide a little bit more power than he has this year. I believe only 7 home runs, 6 in the first half this season. He's been great about getting on base, top of the lineup guy, drawing a ton of walks. He just set a new personal high already in walks this season. So certainly has been getting on base enough. But if he can provide a little bit more power with Rushman and Basayo out particularly, I think that'll go a long way.
That's great to hear about Gunnar, because what a maddening process hitting is. And sometimes it's the silliest stuff. Sometimes it's stuff that you would not want to put yourself in position to feel like you're chasing for something as odd or on paper feeling like you're just kind of doing the wrong thing, but just really slowing down and like taking it easy on yourself. I think can sometimes be the biggest difference, and obviously it paid off this series. And as we've said, his contribution is going to be so important in the second half. We saw it here in Boston.
No, 100%. And he's somebody who is extremely passionate, and you can tell really wants to be playing at the top of his game like he has before. So when he's not going right, the frustration bleeds through. He's slamming bats. He's storming off the field. Some people view that in a lens of that it's immature. And I think there is an element of he's trying to parse some of that back at times, but it's been an extremely frustrating year for him. Obviously, the numbers are not there in the way that he's expected, but I do think that he has shown signs of turning a corner over recent weeks, hitting a lot of really hard balls, maybe too many on the ground, and that's been the problem. If he could just kind of get underneath it a little bit more, I think we were going to start to see some more results, and it's looking like that's what we saw here over the last few days. 3 doubles left on left in that first game, and now a huge triple there to extend the lead for the Orioles there in Game 2 of the doubleheader. So if they can get the Gunnar Henderson of old back, that's going to be a huge boon for this lineup. And now with 9 games left, they return home to face the Atlanta Braves, who are leading the NL East, one of the best teams in the National League this year. They play the Detroit Tigers on the road, a team that is kind of has its playoff hopes on life support as they weigh whether or not to trade Tarek Skubal at the trade deadline. And then they return back home for one last series against the Philadelphia Phillies, who have been another team like the Red Sox that fired its manager and was able to turn its season around and get back in the playoff hunt. So that's 3 teams with playoff aspirations that they play between now and the trade deadline. So this is not a cakewalk schedule for the Orioles. They are still a couple of games under 500. They are 3 games out of wild card spots. So if they can maintain that kind of standing in the wild card, I have to believe that they are going to be buyers at the trade deadline. They start to slide right here. I mean, everything is kind of hanging in the balance at this point. And that's why I say, like, this game against the Red Sox, this series, it wasn't must win, but certainly it put them in a position where now season can still kind of go either way. It's a
can't lose.
Yeah, exactly. It's a can't lose game.
It's not a must win. It's a can't lose.
They were able to do it, and we'll see now if they're able to kind of maintain this momentum. I mean, they've been playing better baseball. 8-10 over the last 10. 8-2 over the last 10. It's been a good run for them. They didn't let the All-Star break kind of disrupt their momentum, and they've been winning some games despite losing players to injury. Blaze goes down, and they still went out and swept Houston right out of the gate. So obviously now they've lost 2 of 3 in a series where they didn't have either of their starting catchers. How does that continue to impact them moving forward? We will see. That is certainly a huge aspect of all of this, is how they're just kind of able to absorb it. But it might just come down to the pitching staff, because that has been truly, really what has been the biggest standout aspect of this team, and what has kind of been carrying them to win so often here of late.
What's the latest intel or timeline of your sense on when Adley or Basayo might be back to full form?
Yeah, I mean, they're both eligible to return middle of next week. I believe Wednesday for Rutschman and Friday for Basayo. So whether or not they return right away, I think it's a little too early to say. Basayo tried to avoid an injured list stint and took batting practice in the cages on Wednesday, and apparently didn't kind of get through it in the way that the team was expecting, and that's why he was placed on the IL. So I think they're hopeful just some rest would allow him to avoid any kind of extended absence or re-aggravating the injury further. So maybe he returns right when he gets back, but the Rutschman injury has been kind of weird. We haven't gotten a ton of details about exactly what the timeline looks like for him, and just how serious this is, and this next steps in terms of the rehab. All we know is that it's wrist inflammation, and he felt it during his last at bat Friday. A right-handed swing for him, came out of it feeling funny, and ultimately they decided that he's going to need some time. So Albert has described it as getting out ahead of this with the wrist. So we'll see if that means that he's able to return pretty much right away. He's done that with his other injuries. This is the 3rd time this season that Rutschman's been on the IL, and they've all been freak injuries. One was getting hit in the head, the errant throw. Another one messing up his ankle while running to second base. So the ankle one, he was able to return after the minimum time. He missed about a week with the concussion. And so maybe this is something that he's able to once again return quickly from, and they're able to get both these guys back before the deadline. I think that's an optimistic view, and certainly within the realm of possibility for both of these guys, but worth monitoring here as we go over the next week.
Yeah, we've talked about the value of them escaping this series, which, we shouldn't talk it up too much, because they only won 1 game. 2 would have been great, 3 would have been unbelievable, but they survived. And folks can go can go read on the BaltimoreSun.com your takeaways from the series. That should be up on the site by now. Any sampling you want to give us from that?
Really, it was just about where they were in the standings, the injuries, and Kyle Bradish showing the kind of ace that he can be with this being his first start since signing that deal. We're going to hear from him again on Friday when the Orioles are hosting his press conference at Camden Yards that afternoon. I believe it'll be at 2:30. So if you want to tune into that, go ahead. But certainly we'll have a ton of coverage, wall to wall of that over at BaltimoreSun.com. So Bradish, not much of a talker, never has been. But certainly the spotlight will be on him, and we'll see who else is there with him, if it's Mike Elias, David Rubenstein. So it's not often you get the GM in a press conference right before the deadline like this. So it should be certainly an interesting couple of hours there on Friday as they prepare to face the Braves. Tony Mansolino return to Baltimore.
Wow.
Looking forward to that, too.
That's right.
And not just Tony Mansolino, but also Jorge Mateo. So both guys with the Braves this year. So there's some fun aspects of this series I'm looking forward to this weekend, catching up with some people. So should be a good time.
That's awesome. I'm really excited for you, Matt.
Hey, thanks, man. All right. We are going to let y'all go, and our past selves will talk to you about the Ravens with training camp just ahead. All right, Sam, a couple of quick headlines to hit on here before we get into the power rankings. Nnamdi Madubuike made a public appearance, his first one since suffering major injury last year. We've obviously been trying to read the tea leaves with him. You were at this youth camp that he ran. Obviously, he did not speak, but what were just your impressions from seeing him out there?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of up top worth acknowledging that this was the first time we had seen him since week 2 against the Browns when he suffered that neck injury. We know that Nnamdi Madubuike underwent some form of neck surgery in April. We know that there has been reported relative optimism within the building for his potential ability to play in 2026, but this whole story has been murky at best. The details are strange or few and far between. Ravens brass have kicked the can down the road. They've opted to let him talk. They've deflected, or excuse me, I should say, they've deflected to let him tell his story when he's ready. So I think more than anything, it's just worth acknowledging that. And I might have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but when we were in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, it was like there were a handful of guys who were either had minor injuries, dinged up, not available, but we saw them. As much as these guys are saying, like Jesse Minter or whoever else is saying that he's been part of the offseason program, all these other guys, we saw them. Ronnie Stanley was out on the field talking to teammates. Rashad Bateman was out on the field talking to Eric DaCosta. Even Travis Jones, like we're seeing all these guys, even if we hadn't seen them play at that point in the offseason. Nnamdi Madubuike was the one player. We didn't even see his face. So this was the first time we had seen him in person at this youth camp, which is great. It's great to see him give back and spend a couple hours on a Saturday morning with kids in the Baltimore area. It was hosted right across the street from the Ravens facility. You mentioned he did not talk. I think again the biggest part of just like bringing this up is the fact that presumably we will get some sort of understanding hopefully soon. And I say that just because we're about a week out, less than a week out from training camp. And the Ravens are going to have to make a decision about, whether he's on the IL to the injured list to start the year, whether he's on the 53-man roster, whether he practices in some capacity. I would imagine maybe, and I'm totally speculating here, but maybe that we see him on the field doing some workouts just because, we've seen social videos of him working out. He seems to certainly be in football shape. It's just a matter of handling the brute physicality of a Sunday in the NFL. So yeah, we saw Nnamdi Madubuike. We did not really get much more clarity than we have in the past, but I think we're all kind of hoping that some light will be shed at some point soon. And I was thinking about this the other day when Lamar Jackson spoke for the first time at minicamp after, I guess for the first time since they lost in Pittsburgh in Week 18. Obviously, a flood of reporters. Everyone is there that day to hear what Lamar Jackson has to say. The same went for Tyler Loop. First time he spoke after the start of an offseason of trying to bounce back from that missed kick. I can only imagine what the reception and the press conference it's just so enticing at this point. They've just left so much mystery on the table. And again, it's crazy to think it's been 10 months since this injury and we still know so little. So obviously the Ravens are hoping to have him back in 2026. That remains a mystery. So we don't spend too much more time on that, but I just think, again, kind of worth noting up top.
Yeah, I mean, considering how cagey the Ravens have been with this, just seeing him out there is a major development and perhaps the biggest one that we have had. Pulse check confirmed.
Honestly, I think the sign of life. I mean, his only form of communication. Again, he is one of the highest paid players on the team, and his only form of communication with the fan base or any outside whomever, the media has all just been through social media videos, several of which not his own. So the communication has been far and few between. Again, Eric DaCosta, Jesse Minter neither has really said anything certain about anything. So it's just been a waiting game. So it's just interesting to see to look back and how long and far this has dragged out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a scary injury, being anything around the neck. Always want to be uber cautious with it, but just a lack of information around it, definitely, makes cause for question of what exactly is going on there and behind the scenes, everything like that. We just don't know. But obviously, as you guys get into training camp and finally maybe get a chance to talk to him, maybe we'll start to get some clarity here over the next few weeks. Speaking of training camp, it is right around the corner. We talked a couple of episodes ago, or last episode, Josh and I, about the Ravens signing center Ethan Pocic, which is one of their last big boxes to check off in free agency heading into camp. They still have one more roster area that our colleague Brian Wacker wrote about for the Baltimore Sun. A veteran wide receiver, one more guy for that receiving room, somebody that you can count on a little bit with all of the question marks that they have in that room. DeAndre Hopkins obviously moving on. They go out in the draft and draft a couple of pass catchers that they're very high on, but at the same time, Could they use a Stephon Diggs, a Keenan Allen, a Debo Samuel, a Tyreek Hill, the four guys that Brian mentioned, as well as maybe a Brandon Ayuk, who obviously has been making all kinds of headlines in the wrong way over the last few weeks. Sam, of that group right there, do any of the names just jump off the table for you? Or jump off the page
Yes,
for you, I should say?
yes. Just before we get to that, Matt, I know you have upwards of 10 fantasy football teams. Play armchair GM, is that what they call it for me?
Yep.
Of those guys that you mentioned, who is the player you least want on your team?
Probably Brandon Ayuk at this point. Yeah. And as somebody who has him in a fantasy dynasty league, this has been an absolute headache because I was hyped earlier before about maybe him going to the Commanders and, linking up with Jaden Daniels. And, okay, that's a good offense, like great potential for him. But just all of the stuff that has come out with him on social media just looks like such a headache to deal with. And he is walking himself really right out of the league, it seems like. The 49ers obviously not paying much attention to him being on off the official roster right now. So what the future looks like for Brandon Ayuk is, I don't know, but I don't think it involves going to the Ravens.
Tyreek Hill might be a close second for me. Obviously coming off injury, and I just think that's just a headache. Of this list, you saw what Stephon Diggs did for the Patriots in terms of the way he composed himself within that locker room from the outside looking in, what we saw about what he did for that group. Obviously, they went to the Super Bowl with a fairly new coach. First year coach, right? Mike Vrabel's a first year coach. So
first year
I think,
with the new team.
Yes. Should clarify. Jesse Minter being the actual first year coach. But that's all to say, I think like from a football standpoint, could Stephon Diggs contribute to the Ravens? 100%. I think that he's certainly someone who is more outspoken. This would be, his fourth team in as many years. You start to wonder about those things. So I think it's certainly a name that if they brought Stephon Diggs to Baltimore, it would be exciting for the fan base. I think the more reasonable guess from this list, I think the more reasonable, hopeful addition, if you're a Ravens fan, would probably be Keenan Allen. He overlapped with Jesse Minter in LA. More than anything, he's a respected locker room presence. Zay Flowers was asked, I guess this must have been during minicamp, about DeAndre Hopkins leaving. Like, Zay Flowers, one of the oldest in the room. He's Rashad Bateman is the only receiver older than Zay Flowers, but in that room. But Zay Flowers kind of becomes like the front of that wide receiver room. Obviously, production-wise, he led the group last year, but it's weird to think about. I was just having covered him since his rookie year. His first few years in the league. Like, it's just funny to think about, and I think it was funny for him to hear, like, hey, you're now the vet in the room, like you're the guy. And Rashad Bateman, although he's a few years older, has never really been, at least with us, or the understanding we have about that dynamic, like he's not exactly the most outspoken, and I think there's also more intrinsic motivation for him to have a rebound year, to have a bounce back year after what Eric DaCosta has described as a lost year. So I think it'd be valuable, especially considering the rest of that wide receiver room, which as we look at it now, is probably Tez Walker, who they say is primed for a breakout year. And I think if you can get Tez to develop into, if he can be the next, really strong homegrown receiver, awesome. And then obviously having two rookies that the Ravens see really high ceilings for. If you can bring in someone like Keenan Allen to be a vet for those guys, then I think that would do wonders for the group. It's kind of just a matter of like, how do they fit in the like roster wise, and are they willing to spend that money and take that roster spot?
From that standpoint of the leadership aspect and the type of receiver that Keenan Allen is, I think he would be fantastic for Elijah Surratt to learn from. You want to talk about a possession receiver who's probably been the best route running wide receiver of the last 10 years, or maybe of his prime, the 10 years around his prime, I'd say. It's just so smooth moving over the middle of the field, and I think that Surratt could certainly learn a lot from him. In terms of a productivity standpoint, he's probably on the lower end for me, just in what stage he's in his career. He's clearly taken a couple of steps back. I mean, obviously Stephon Diggs is entering his age 33 season this year, but at the same time, he just had a 1,000-yard season, finished fifth in Comeback Player of the Year award voting, got 100 targets in a Drake May offense last year. So I think they're actually, you could still count on him to be a pretty solid number 2 receiver at this stage in his career. And I think there was a quote from him a couple weeks ago saying he's the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. So with that kind of confidence, I think you can still very much get a lot out of him. I would be intrigued by Deebo Samuel, who isn't coming off of the best couple of seasons for sure, but is 3 years younger than Stephon Diggs. And I think in a Declan Doyle offense, he could have a lot of fun with a player like that who can be used in a variety of ways, a joker type. We hear that about that's what maybe Adam Randall is going to be in this offense, but to have a Deebo type as well from the receiving core, I think could be, I think he'd be licking his chops at the opportunity to do something like that with a guy like Deebo. I think Tyreek Hill, there's certainly some baggage there, but I think he still has one very good season left in him at this stage of his career. He's Tyreek Hill. He was the best wide receiver in football for probably a good 3-year span at one point in his career. So I think honestly, Keenan Allen might be at the bottom of the list just from a pure football standpoint to me. Sure. But I do think that, like you said, very much a respected locker room presence and someone who Elijah Surratt in particular could learn a lot from.
And we should acknowledge, the idea of a locker room presence, none of this is to disparage the leadership skills of Zay Flowers. I think he can be really good for the couple younger receivers in that room, but he'll be the first to tell you, and of course he's still on his rookie contract. He'll be the first to tell you that Nelson Aguilar, Odell Beckham Jr., and DeAndre Hopkins were all played such huge parts in him getting to the point where he is, a 2-time Pro Bowler, multiple 1,000-yard seasons. I don't know if he's at that point in his career where he can mentor the guy beneath him, because he's still moving in that direction. He's not quite at the veteran role yet. So it just feels like it feels like something that where if they do bring in a guy, and I know we've had this conversation a couple times, and I think it makes sense if they can make it work roster wise. And so much of the conversation really comes back to, when you look at that roster crunch, what is your confidence level in a Rashad Bateman bounce back here? What is your, whatever they say externally, what is your genuine internal confidence in Tez Walker to actually have a breakout year? He had 6 catches last year for 3 touchdowns. If he can do, if he can give you 5 touchdowns, and if he can catch the ball a couple times, or you can throw, at least trust him to be your 3rd or 4th option, sure, I think that would be great. And then maybe the biggest one is how much internal confidence do you really, really, really have in 2026 for Elijah Surratt and Jacoby Lane? Because if you think, yes, they can be great, but it's going to take a year or two for both of them, you're going to want to bring someone in. If you're we've seen enough, this guy's ready to go, he's going to be really, really good for us as a rookie, you're probably less inclined to go out and bring someone in. So how much they say externally, probably limited, but I think we'll know their answer based on whether they bring someone in.
Right. I mean, you just look at this wide receiver group right now, and what you're talking about and going down the list with these guys, it's some things have to break right for them. What are you able to bank on from each of those 4 receivers that you talk about outside of Zay Flowers? And as we saw last year, there wasn't a whole lot to just bank on with this wide receiver group, and you throw 2 rookies in there, and I don't think that necessarily changes my confidence level in this wide receiver core. And that's not to say that these 2 rookies aren't going to end up being guys for them. I have talked a lot about Surratt. I think was a great pick for them, even being drafted after Jacoby Lane. I think he has a very high floor for the type of receiver he is, and potential to do even more. So I like both of them. I think they both have very interesting skill sets, and I'm interested to see what this coaching staff does when they get their hands on them. But somebody who I can count on, someone who I know will be able to get open for Lamar Jackson as he is working with an offensive line that we're still not 100% sold on. Guys that are going to be able to run good routes and get open 50-50 balls, all that kind of stuff. When a play breaks down, who is going to be the guy with the savviness to read a defense and how it's moving and find a spot to get open? That is not something I'm necessarily super confident about with rookies in general, and obviously with this wide receiver group and how it has not been able to produce a true number 2 behind Zay Flowers for years now. I think getting another veteran in there just to provide yourself some security and also some stability could go a really long way for this offense.
Exactly, because if you're bringing someone in, they're going to be your number two. I should shout out. I've had this conversation a couple times with Ken Weinman on his show on 105.7 The Fan, and every time we talk about the receiver room, he always makes the comment of like, "Man, last year was a lot of Zay and Prey because Zay Flowers, again, we've talked about it nauseum, like the difference between Zay Flowers' production and Mark Andrews was second. So you look at the next receiver, like it was a stark difference in production from your number two. So if you're bringing in someone, you either have, again, the confidence that Rashad Bateman is going to come back and be a genuine number two to Zay Flowers in a way that can make you a serious Super Bowl contender, or you're bringing in someone to be that number two, which, you mentioned Keenan Allen's numbers have not been what they were in his prime. Stephon Diggs among that group might make the most sense for you want number two receiver production. You are squeezing out the last bit of juice. And Stephon Diggs probably falls most in line with the Odell D-Hop sort of pattern. Like I think just getting a veteran like that to come in and be that guy to be your number two makes the most sense.
Plus,
but
who doesn't love a homecoming, Bring
that's
home.
right. We should also note that like the three of them very different, end up kind of playing very different roles. But both Odell and DeAndre Hopkins were great veterans for that receiver room and specifically for Zay Flowers. So so much of it just comes back to that roster crunch and how confident they are in the group, because there are a lot of questions. The ceiling, I think, is relatively high with that receiver room. DeAndre Hopkins posted on social media, quote tweeted a video of Jacoby Lane, how confident he is. I saw another clip, totally blanking on who it was. Someone important, interesting, and smart said they were really high on the Ravens receiver room. And again, I'm totally blanking. But I think there is on paper confidence. It's just a matter of like, do they feel like they feel so confident they don't need to go get someone, or they like, do they want to get someone just to be sure? So be interesting to see how this goes over the next couple weeks.
Well, speaking of on paper confidence, let's switch gears here, Sam, and talk about some NFL power rankings. Sam compiled a few lists from around the national media of where the perception is of the Ravens right now. And interested, Sam, where do they fall on these power rankings, the top 32, and where do you feel like it kind of hits the mark or maybe misses it?
I'm excited because we disagree. We don't disagree on a lot. We're a pretty inline podcast. We're kind of the opposite of First Take. Like they have production meetings for First Take, and they're like, "I'm going to take this side, and you take the other side." And in our production meetings, before we record, we're like,
"Yeah,
shoot."
we agree.
We're like, "Yeah, no, that sounds great, man. I think you're really smart and awesome." So the NFL power rankings, as you mentioned, I grabbed a couple from around a few different outlets. ESPN has them at number 17 coming into this year. Bleacher Report has them 13th. The Ringer has them 12th. I put in our notes, I think that kind of 12 to 17 range feels fair for a team coming off of an 8-9 season with an entirely new coaching staff and numerous questions at a few different positions. I think the ceiling of what they can be is pretty high, but as of right now, it comes back to the same reason why I predicted them a couple months ago to be a 10-win team. I just don't think there are enough answers, and I do think that training camp will provide a fair chunk of answers to many of the questions that I have about this team. And I do want to just kind of read out, because I think it's worth in the power rankings discussion, just acknowledge like where they are among some other teams. For Bleacher Report, they are one ahead of the Green Bay Packers and one below the Detroit Lions at 13. The Ringer has them one behind the Philadelphia Eagles and ahead of the Detroit Lions. And ESPN has them, drumroll please, at 17. The Eagles are 18, and the Chiefs are 16. So several of these outlets have them in the same conversation, let's say, as the Lions and what was the other team I said? The Eagles.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, Matt, do you think that that's the league they belong in?
I absolutely do, and I think that the Ravens should be in the top 10 right now. I mean, this roster is unequivocally better than the one that they had last year. And they went into last year with the best roster in football on paper, as was talked about a lot, particularly about the defense and the secondary. And obviously things broke down, but they go out and they get Trey Hendrickson. They draft Vega Ioane for the offensive line. They have, obviously, Lamar Jackson fully healthy after he played through injury last year. I mean, they were one kick away from making the playoffs last year, and I think that them missing the playoffs, but also going through a coaching change, has really shaped just kind of push the Ravens to the back burner of, the NFL's attention. I mean, I'm looking at the Ringers power rankings right now, and they have the Buffalo Bills at number 4. And I really don't think there are a whole lot of differences in the caliber of roster that the Bills have versus what the Ravens have. And the Bills are going through a coaching change this offseason as well. So I'm not sure that I agree putting them down towards the middle of the pack. I still think that they are a kind of sleeping giant in the NFL. They have so much talent, and everybody's a year older, and there are questions, as we've talked about, with some of the veterans that they're really relying on this year to continue to be dudes. And if those declines start to happen more sharply than anticipated, there are going to be some problems. But I do think that there's just so much talent, and anytime you have Lamar Jackson, a very healthy Lamar Jackson on your team, I have to feel good about my chances of winning any given football game. So I would probably put them at number 10 right now, maybe even 8 or 9, but I can definitely make the case for at least 6, 7 other teams that are firmly ahead of them. And then I think there's a bubble where I see them as one of the juggernauts of that group that deserves pushing up to the top of the crop.
Well, Matt, what I'm about to tell you could be spun to help your argument, or it could also be spun to help my argument. I'm realizing as I'm about to say this that you could use it either way. I agree, obviously, with the idea that like the Ravens were one kick away from making the playoffs. In a vacuum, it was, 10 feet from them being in the playoffs. And granted, Steve Bisciotti did say like they make it to the first round and lose. Maybe they make it to the second. Like John Harbaugh was probably losing his job. More specifically, and I think more accurately, they were 2 65-yard drives by a not very good Steelers team in the fourth quarter was the difference between them making the playoffs and not. They were the better team, the Steelers. They played a much better fourth quarter. Lamar Jackson was unbelievable in that fourth quarter, but they gave up 2 brutal touchdowns, 2 backbreaking touchdowns that put them in a position to lose that game and require a miracle, which they were very close to doing, but it required a miracle in that fourth quarter. The defense was very bad last year. So I say that from my perspective and my argument to say, how confident are we the defense is that much better personnel-wise? I think that adding Trey Hendrickson will help them. I think that Mike Green taking a year to leap will help them. I'm not sure Zion Young will be good enough in his rookie year to move the needle for me, but I think you're banking on 2 unknowns, which is, does Trey Hendrickson still have it in the tank after coming off in a season in which he missed time due to injury? Yeah.
It's not like ACL or something, though. Like, it is an injury that, like, very much a track record of being able to come back and still be you. I'm still counting on Trey Hendrickson for 15-plus sacks this year. I mean, that's my expectation for him. At
his age, if you can get that, awesome. And then I think you're also banking on Mike Green. Exactly. You're also banking on Mike Green. So I do think they got better in that respect. I think that if Nnamdi Madubuike is not available, you're not uber confident in the interior of that defensive line. Bringing Calais Campbell's great. I think he'll help, but he can't give you the kind of reps that you need if Nnamdi Madubuike is not available. And Travis Jones showed in 2025 he can't be a solo game wrecker. Like, he kind of needs someone next to him to help open up those rushing lanes. On the defense, Marlon Humphrey, are we sure that he's going to be much better than he was last year? I think there is confidence in this defense. I would also say that Jesse Minter probably makes this defense better. I just think that there are enough questions or enough uncertainties that I'm not ready to say that they're so much better. I think when you look at the entirety of the team, another part of the reason I don't put them into the top 10, and you said this before, like, there is still uncertainty in the offensive line. There's uncertainty about that wide receiver room, about whether they will have a true number 2, because there are 4 guys who you could say they could all be a number 2, and will any of them step up? We're just not sure. It's really, really hard to bet against Derrick Henry. It's really, really hard to bet against Lamar Jackson. So I think there are so many reasons why this team can be top 10 in the league. I just think that entering training camp, it's hard for me and apparently several other outlets to say it's just so hard and I say all that because this was who they were last year. This was who they were the year before. This was who they were the year before that. Like, they couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't get over the hump back-to-back years and then they fall short of the playoffs, there has to be a massive difference in the way they play football or a roster change that gives you that much confidence they'll be top 10. I agree with you they're a better roster. I agree with you the ceiling is higher, and I do think that this coaching staff will be good for them. But how can you look at the way the last 3 years ended and say after an 8-9 season that they are that much better? The linebacker group is also the other one I should mention. Like Roquan Smith admitted he came off a down year. Teddy Buchanan is expected to be healthy by the start of this year. Trenton Simpson has lost his job 2 or 3 times. Like you don't really have much leeway if there's an injury there to feel like you're still in it. So there are so many questions across the roster. I think training camp helps with a lot of them. Because of a lot of that, I just have a hard time saying they're a top 10 team because they were a Super Bowl favorite entering last year with one of the best rosters in the league, and they missed the playoffs altogether.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's about track record. And this is a team that won 12 games just 2 years ago, 13 games the year before that, was a slam dunk top 5 team in the NFL going into the playoffs every single year. And yes, the way that their seasons have ended, end colossally bad because of just getting in their own way and things like that, yes. But also they've played close games against these other teams that they're clearly chasing right now at the top of the league and trying to get back into the conversation with. And I think that, at the end of the day, they went and made a coaching change to try and eliminate that. So I'm going to give the Ravens the benefit of the doubt just a little bit this year of going in, just saying that last year maybe was more of an aberration. And obviously they got off to such a terrible start. But in the second half of the year, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. After getting off to that dreadful start, I believe it was 2-5 to begin the year. So from that point on, 1-5. I mean, from that point on,
I guess 2-5 too, yeah. But
well, yeah, 1-5 would be all right.
Yeah.
From that point, after those first 6 games, they had one of the best records in the NFL. So they just started playing like the Ravens again with
against non-playoff teams for the most part.
They beat the Packers. They beat the Bears. I mean, they had a couple of nice wins in there for sure. Honestly, you take away the 2 games against the Steelers, and the only team they did lose to was the Bengals once. So
yeah.
The Steelers clearly had their number last year. Maybe that just happens with a division rival from time to time when a team is able to beat you twice like that in a season. But at the same time, I think that this group here, like, you can't convince me that the Houston Texans right now are any better of a spot. While obviously their defense is a top 5 unit in the NFL, maybe a top 3, maybe number 1, their offense, they just ended in absolute disaster fashion last year going into the playoffs. And how many interceptions did C.J. Stroud throw in that game? 5. I mean, it was just an absolute disaster, and they look completely outclassed. The Eagles have run so hot and cold, and they went out and traded one of their best playmakers, A.J. Brown, this offseason, so their roster is going to be looking a little bit different. I just think that the Ravens deserve a little bit more respect from the rest of the league right now. The moment you start sleeping on this team, I think they're going to really surprise some people and get back into that conversation very quickly. I mean, honestly, they go out in week 1 against Indy, and Lamar gets 350 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and they win by 2 scores. They're going to shoot up every power rankings to be top 5 in a weekend, like a weekend, if that's how and that's going to happen, right? Like, if that is where we're at, where we get one game and we're like, okay, they're so back, like we're putting them in there, like, why are we not giving them the respect now that is certainly part of their range of outcomes? And they have proven time and time again that they are one of those teams. They're just not coming off of the greatest of years and have some question marks on the coaching staff being a new group. But honestly, they go out and get one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, and Jesse Minter. I'm all in terms of that being a good hire, and I am very, very much not going to put myself in the camp of doubting the Ravens at this stage of the season.
What if I told you that ESPN's ranking, which had the Ravens at 17, has John Harbaugh's New York Football Giants at number 9?
That's hilarious. Actually hilarious.
When's the
last time the Giants had a winning season? I mean, like, come on. What are we doing here?
I think 17 is disrespectfully low. I lean, like, I think top 10. I think there's certainly an argument to make for top 10. Like, I'm not going to fight back against that. I think in that 8 to 12 range to me feels the most fair because you're looking at a team like I think even in that 10 to 12, like you're looking at a team with a critical eye, knowing that they're probably going to shoot up into if they shoot up the power rankings in the first 2 weeks. If they go 2-0, even though they're playing like the Colts and the Saints are not exactly world beaters, but if they go 1-1 to Rio to go play Dallas, like are they in your top 10? Obviously, it depends on how the rest of the league shakes out. But you mentioned how much they shoot up that list if they play great in week 1, but if they lose in week 2 to the Saints, they lay a dud as they tend to do early in the year. Like, is that team still some? Again, these things take time. It's Jesse Minter's first season. They're probably not the team that they're going to be at the end of the year for a month or two into the season. Like they're going to evolve. Injuries are going to play a factor, but I tend to lean in that 10 to 12 range. Feels like a fair critical look at a team that was so disappointing in so many aspects, that also lost 2 All-Pro guys, a really impactful tight end when he's at his best. And I think they just have some questions about where some of these younger guys are going to be this year. But you mentioned I do think the defense takes a step forward under Jesse Minter. He's just proven at previous stops that he can do that quickly.
One winning season in the last 9 years, by the way, for your New York Football Giants. Which, did you see John Harbaugh's first address to the team?
I was thinking when you had texted me that you were walking back to your hotel and we were going to talk about it, I was like, I want to remember to bring this up to Matt because I think it would be funny to talk about that video. For anyone listening who is not, I encourage you to go listen to John Harbaugh's riveting
tough watch
speech to his team. Someone said that John Harbaugh lost his fastball. I thought that was funny. Yeah, not great. I mean, he had a lot of success in Baltimore. I think he's still someone who can have a lot of success in New York, get a team riled up and take them into battle. But that specific clip that the team chose to post was certainly interesting, an interesting editorial decision.
It will be interesting to watch him from afar this year, as the Ravens have never had to do.
Who has Harbaugh. Who has the better record, the Browns under Todd Monken or the Giants under John Harbaugh?
That's a good question, and I'm definitely going to go Giants. Mostly because I think the NFC East is like, it's good, but it's also just kind of like very unsettled. Whereas the Browns are so clearly still the number 4 team.
The 4th team.
In the AFC North, yeah. Which, wait, real quick before we get out of here, do you have the Bengals above or behind the Ravens in your unassembled power rankings?
I definitely have the Steelers below them. And I was thinking about this as you were talking, that I do think the Ravens probably edge out the Bengals, but if Joe Burrow is healthy this season, and if that defense
some moves this offseason,
I was going to say, if that defense
line got revamped,
yep, and that defense was like the worst defense in football last year. If they can be a little bit better, I do think that offense is. I think exactly. I think that offense is good enough. If the defense can clear a certain bar, the offense is good enough to take them where they need to go. Where they need to go being to win the division. I'm not calling them a real Super Bowl contender yet, but it's I don't know. It's close. They're neck and neck. But I think on paper, I give the Ravens the edge.
And that's the thing for me is
which is a wait real quick. Which to me could mean 10-win team into the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tough division. We've seen before them all kind of beat each other up and suppress some win totals, so that's the thing. But like the Bengals record the last 3 seasons, and I get that Joe Burrow has missed a lot of time here, but 9-8, 9-8, 6-11. I'm giving the Ravens the benefit of the doubt over the Bengals at this point. Like the Bengals have to prove that they are still capable of being the team that they were in 21-22 when they were going to the Super Bowl and winning the division. Like this is a very different roster now because they had to pay Joe Burrow, they had to pay Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and to have so much of their salary cap soaked up by 3 players. They've had to cut the fat other places. And I think that this year they finally were able to make some bigger splashes over the offseason, whereas they kind of had quiet off seasons the last few seasons. So I'm interested to see what the Bengals look like this year, but they are to me more in the we need to prove it tier than the Ravens are.
Yeah. And I think we can kind of end here just acknowledging, and several of these power rankings mention this, that the Ravens are relying on some young talent. Zay Flowers is still in that group. Kyle Hamilton, although he's one of the highest paid safeties, is kind of still in that group. But really, you're looking at, you need a lot from Teddy Buchanan, Nate Wiggins, Mike Green, maybe Zion Young, Roger Rosengarten on the offensive side of the ball, Venga Ioane, and then somewhere in that medley of 4 pass catchers, two receivers and 2 tight ends, the Matthew Hibner, Josh Cuevas, Elijah Sarant, Jacoby Lane group, like you need 2 of them to be able to meaningfully contribute in 2026 based on the way the roster is constructed right now. So I think these are all important things to remember. And it's like, sure, they can all definitely be guys who can contribute as rookies. It's just like, as of right now, we're not entirely sure that they will be able to.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Going to go ahead and wrap there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give the show 5 stars on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you guys get your podcasts. And give us a follow. Engage with us over on social media at Sun Early Birds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Sam, any final words for the good people?
Shoot, I didn't have anything prepared here. I'm curious what our, we talked about this earlier in the show about the Orioles. I'm curious where our listeners' confidence is in this team and how it's changed over the years. So, please, engage with us on social media, send us a message, email us, whatever. Because it's what a strange team this is, where the pendulum swings just back and forth every week. So yeah, I'm curious where exactly. I'm curious where our listeners are at with that, and whether they'd rather watch the movie Whiplash or this Orioles team play baseball.
There's a very clear answer for me on the part. He's Sam Cohn. I'm Matt Weyrich. Thank y'all so much for listening, and have a good one.